Hi, I'm Malis. They laughed when I married a mechanic, called me the sister who settled, the one who didn't dream big. My brother? He made it his job to remind everyone I didn't belong. Not at the table, not in the family, not in the future. But what if I told you the same mechanic they mocked was quietly buying pieces of their empire, right under their noses? And when the truth came out, when I stood in the boardroom and said the words that ended his career, none of them saw it coming. Still, what hurts the most wasn't the firing. It was realizing how long they were willing to treat me like I didn't matter. What would you do if your own family built a world where you were never meant to win? And you did anyway. There's always a moment, just one, when you walk into a room full of family and instantly remember where you stand in the unspoken hierarchy. For me, that moment came the second I stepped through my mother's front door and saw Talon grinning like he ran the place. Which, honestly, he always sort of did. Boise's spring air hadn't even had a chance to shake off its late chill, but inside that house, it was already warm with wine and too many opinions. Balloons floated limp above the dining table, and a store-bought cake, vanilla with far too much pink frosting, sat untouched beside a stack of paper plates. Mom liked to keep things casual, which meant Talon told everyone what to bring and took credit for the setup. Cassian parked the car around the block because Talon always filled the driveway with his fleet of leased vehicles. I waited by the sidewalk while he locked the doors, pocketed the keys, and gave me that calm, grounding smile I'd come to depend on. "You ready?" he asked, brushing his thumb lightly over my knuckles. I nodded, even though I wasn't. Inside, I barely made it 10 feet before my sister-in-law, Seraphine, descended with a flurry of perfume and passive aggression. She pressed a kiss to the air beside my cheek and whispered, "I wasn't sure you'd come. We weren't sure if, Cassian would be comfortable in a setting like this." I didn't rise to it. Cassian, bless him, just smiled and said, "Any room with Malis in it is one I'm happy to be in." Her expression faltered just long enough for me to savor it. 1 point for our side. Mom appeared next, her cardigan hanging off one shoulder, hair perfectly sprayed. "Sweetheart," she said to me, "you look cozy." Translation: I wasn't wearing heels or anything with dry clean only tags. Cassian wore a chambray shirt and work boots, clean but clearly not Wall Street chic. Not like Talon's crew in the dining room, laughing about markets and mergers while sipping their Cabernets. We made our way to the long table in the dining area. Name tags sat in little folded tents beside each plate, Talon's idea for keeping things organized. When I reached mine, I stared. Mechanic's wife, not Malis, not even Cassian and Malis, just that, I heard someone snicker behind me. Then Talon's voice boomed over the din, perfectly timed, always rehearsed. "Hey, at least her car never breaks down, right? That's what you get when you marry the help." Laughter followed like a wave, the kind that doesn't fade quickly, the kind that leaves a sting. Cassian reached for my chair, pulled it out gently. I sat, stared at my plate, hands folded so tightly in my lap they ached. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. I felt his hand on my knee, firm, steady. His quiet way of saying, "I see you. I'm here." Dinner went on in the typical Raymer fashion, Talon bragging about his latest acquisition, Seraphine chiming in with rehearsed admiration, and Mom trying to play diplomat while sipping white wine from a glass that always stayed full. I barely touched my food. At one point, Talon leaned across the table, a fake friendly grin plastered on his face. "Still working in admin, sis? Or did you finally upgrade to something real?" Before I could respond, Mom said, "Malis has always been very grounded. Not everyone needs a corner office to be fulfilled." There it was, the smile and swallow version of, "She's not much, but she's ours." I excused myself to the restroom and splashed cold water on my face. Stared at the woman in the mirror, the one with dark circles and soft lines around the mouth from too many years of forced smiles. When I came back, Cassian had shifted his seat closer to mine, subtle, comforting, familiar. Later, after cake and the obligatory photo montage, the guests began to thin. Cassian helped clear plates while I gathered napkins into a trash bag, avoiding eye contact, wondering why I still bothered. In the kitchen, Mom cornered me. "You know your brother only teases because he cares," she said. Sure, I replied. He just has a really strange way of showing it. She sighed. He's under a lot of pressure. The business, the investors, he doesn't mean anything by it. I didn't argue. There was no point. We said our goodbyes. Seraphine gave me another air kiss. Talon slapped Cassian on the shoulder and said, "If you ever need work, real work, I've got a lawn that needs mowing." Cassian just smiled. You'd be surprised what I know about grass. In the car, as we pulled away, I didn't speak. I stared out the window at the house I'd grown up in, still too small and too loud in all the wrong ways. Cassian drove in silence, letting me simmer. He knew better than to ask if I was okay. As we turned the corner, I finally said it. I'm tired of them thinking we're less. His grip on the steering wheel didn't change, but his jaw did. They've never seen us clearly, he said. Maybe it's time we made them look. That night, after Cassian fell asleep, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed with a message from Zinnia. Just a meme about being the forgotten sibling, meant to be funny, but it landed like a punch. I opened my laptop and started a new document. Title, The List. I wrote, Family Investment Meeting, not invited. Cassian offered engine design to Talon, declined, then used idea months later. Birthday dinner 2020. You still dating the car guy? Wedding gift card from Talon, expired. And tonight, mechanic's wife. The cursor blinked at me like a dare. I wasn't writing to keep score. I was writing to remember. Because if they were going to pretend I didn't matter, then they'd never see it coming when I did. Cassian found me at the kitchen counter, still wearing my coat, staring at a spreadsheet that wasn't technically a spreadsheet, just a long, neat list of dates and offenses. He didn't ask what it was. He just placed a mug of hot chamomile beside me and leaned against the counter. You okay? He asked softly. I didn't answer, not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't find the words that would explain how something like a name tag could shake me so deeply. Instead, I closed the laptop and said, We need to be ready. 2 weeks passed like fog on a windshield, there but not solid. I went to work. I came home. I cooked dinner. I smiled when needed. But something was shifting. I wasn't just remembering their words anymore. I was starting to believe the silence that followed them meant something too. Then came the email. I was sorting through old receipts when a message from Seraphine popped into my inbox, forwarded accidentally from her personal to our family thread. The subject line read, Investment doc for Thursday. Do not share with Malis. I clicked before I could talk myself out of it. Inside was a PDF, preliminary planning for a new Raymer family investment. A real estate development venture, suburban retail space and housing units. One of those safe projects Talon loved to pitch to his boardroom buddies. At the bottom of the list of included family stakeholders, there it was. Malis, not relevant, mechanic family, leave out. Not even a name, just a label. I didn't forward it. I didn't reply. I didn't screenshot it. I didn't need to. Instead, I got dressed for Sunday brunch. Talon's house sat on the edge of one of those planned neighborhoods where every lawn looked like a golf course and every mailbox had been custom installed by someone trying to outdo the neighbor across the street. We arrived 5 minutes early. Cassian insisted. You walk in late, they think you've got something to prove. You walk in early, they wonder what they missed. Seraphine opened the door with her usual frozen smile. Wow, Malis, twice in 1 month. Did we win the lottery? Something like that, I said, and walked right in. The house smelled like smoked salmon, fresh-cut citrus, and money. The kind of clean, curated wealth that never looked effortless but was desperate to pretend it was. The brunch spread was set up like a magazine shoot. Cassian reached for a plate, and Talon appeared beside him. Careful there, bro. That's imported. Hope your calloused hands don't chip the china, he joked, loud enough for the room to hear. Cassian just nodded. Hands are steady. Comes with doing real work. The room chuckled politely. I moved to the far side of the table where Talon's prized car, his vintage '68 Mustang, was parked just outside the French doors, gleaming like it had been detailed 5 minutes ago. A few guests, unfamiliar faces, gathered near it, admiring. That baby right there, Talon said, sidling up beside them, took me 2 years to restore. Every detail, mine. I rebuilt the transmission myself, hand-sourced the trim, even the custom upholstery. I stared at him. Cassian had spent 4 months last year, after work and on weekends, restoring that car in our garage. Every bolt, every hinge, every seam, his hands, his sweat. Talon had dropped it off and paid for parts, nothing more. I felt my jaw tighten. Cassian noticed. He walked over and stood beside me, whispered, "Don't let him bait you. That car's a billboard. You're the blueprint." Later, while Talon was entertaining someone from the local Chamber of Commerce, I slipped into the bathroom and sat on the edge of the tub. I wasn't crying. I didn't have tears left for that sort of betrayal. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened a blank note, and typed, "Talon's Mustang, credit theft." I added it to the list. On the drive home, Cassian kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting on my thigh. "You've been quiet," he said gently. I looked out the window. The afternoon sun was sliding behind gray clouds, casting everything in a dull, washed-out tone. "I saw the email," I finally said. He didn't ask which one. He knew. "I'm sorry," he said. "It's not about the money," I murmured. "It's that they didn't even pretend I belonged." Cassian took a long breath. "They don't get to decide where you belong." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "They already did." "No," he said. "They assumed, and that's their mistake. You're the one who sees everything clearly. That's why they leave you out. They're scared you'll actually challenge them." Back home, I headed straight to my office. I didn't turn on the lights, just sat in the dark, watching the cursor blink on my screen. I pulled up the email again. "Not relevant, mechanic family, leave out." I copied the line, pasted it into the spreadsheet. Then I started a new column. Pattern. Next to each slight, I started marking who said what, when, and how often it happened. It wasn't about revenge, it was about visibility. I wasn't collecting dirt. I was mapping my erasure. At 1:43 a.m., I closed the laptop, poured a glass of water, and stood in the kitchen barefoot, staring into the dark backyard. The porch light buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow on the patch of gravel where Cassian had first parked his tools when we moved in. They called us small. They thought we were predictable. But I'd seen enough. They wanted me invisible. And maybe that's what made me dangerous. They forgot invisible doesn't mean powerless. The day started like most others. The sun crawled in through the kitchen blinds as I reheated coffee and Cassian packed up tools for the garage. We didn't speak much that morning, just exchanged glances and quiet nods. Something about the silence felt heavier, but neither of us named it out loud. After breakfast, I went into Cassian's office to help him locate a file he needed for one of his custom rebuild projects. I knew my way around his desktop just enough to be helpful, but it was mostly muscle memory from years of tracking invoices and ordering parts. I clicked open a shared folder marked Old Estimates, and while skimming for a file with a specific client code, I noticed a subfolder titled Raymer Emails, Legal Backup. My hand hovered over the trackpad. I knew I shouldn't, but I clicked. Inside were screenshots of messages between Talon and a few extended family members. Most of them were dated back 2 or 3 years, long before any of this started feeling like a war. The one that made my stomach knot had been sent the week before my wedding. Subject line, "What's she even bringing to the table?" Talon had written, "Between you and me, our little dishwashing sister is about to marry the guy who changes my oil. Hope she likes smelling like carb cleaner." There were 3 laugh reacts, one from Seraphine, one from our cousin Blake, one from Mom. Not a single reply telling him to stop, not a single word in my defense. I didn't cry, I didn't throw anything, I didn't even close the folder. I just sat there, stunned, while the words branded themselves into my memory. I stepped away from the desk slowly and walked outside. The morning was crisp, and the sun hadn't yet burned through the haze hanging over the back fence. I stood there for a while, arms crossed over my chest, trying to steady the tightness in my throat. That wasn't teasing. That was erasure. I didn't realize Cassian had come outside until I heard the garage door creak open behind me. He stood in the doorway, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "You found it, didn't you?" he asked. I didn't have to ask what he meant. "Yeah," I said. "I did." He nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting for that moment. "I was going to delete them, but I figured one day you'd want to see it for yourself." We didn't speak after that. We didn't need to. That afternoon, I had a meeting downtown for a side project I'd taken on, a small local business trying to digitize their inventory. It was an excuse to get out of the house, to feel like I had control over something. After the meeting, I stopped at a corner cafe I used to frequent in college. The barista had changed, but the smell of roasted beans and vanilla syrup took me back instantly. I sat at the far corner near the window, flipping through emails on my phone when I heard a voice from behind. "Malis?" I turned and saw Vesper Clark, someone I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. We had shared an ethics class in undergrad, and she'd gone on to become a freelance journalist specializing in labor and business reporting. We hugged, exchanged the usual pleasantries, jobs, spouses, neighborhoods. She asked about Cassian. I asked about her articles. Then, out of nowhere, she said, "Isn't your brother's company being investigated right now?" I blinked. "What?" She leaned in a little. "Talon Raymer Dynamics? There's buzz about an OSHA violation and possible labor underpayment. I thought maybe you'd heard." I forced a neutral smile. "Must be a mix-up. I haven't heard anything." She shrugged. "Maybe. But if it's true, I imagine there'll be headlines soon. Just figured you'd know, being family." We parted after a few more minutes of small talk. But the moment I stepped outside, I wasn't walking, I was storming. Back home, I opened my laptop, heart pounding in a rhythm that didn't feel like mine. I typed Raymer Dynamics labor complaint into the search bar. And there it was. Not front-page news, but a small article from a Boise business ethics blog outlining a preliminary complaint filed by 2 former employees. Claims of unsafe working conditions. Clock-in manipulation. Threats against whistleblowers. Nothing proven, but real. I printed it out, highlighted names, dates, keywords, and then I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out the family photo album. Flipping through, I found a picture of Talon holding me on his shoulders when I was 5. We were at a local fair, cotton candy in hand, both smiling like life had no corners. I stared at that picture for a long time. Then I tucked it back in the album, closed the cover, and slid it under the couch. Later that night, Cassian came home smelling of oil and metal. I handed him the printout. He read it without blinking. Then he said, "They've shown you who they are. What will you show them?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I walked back into my office and reopened my laptop. I moved the list into a new folder called Project Reset, and I whispered, not like a victim, not like someone who needed to be rescued, but like a woman who knew exactly what she was about to do. "This isn't just disrespect. It's a pattern." Then I hit save. The invitation came 3 weeks after I started collecting receipts. Not the kind you keep for taxes, but the ones you gather in your soul. It was an email from Seraphine, dressed up in polite wording and half-hearted emojis. "Backyard bash at our place next Saturday. Just a casual little get-together. Talon's calling it family unity. You know how he is. Bring whatever you want. Kids welcome. Business friends might stop by. Hope to see you and Cassian there." Cassian read it over my shoulder and said nothing at first. Then, with a half-smile, he asked, "You want to go watch him peacock in his natural habitat?" I exhaled through my nose, more weary than amused. "I think I need to. I want to see what he looks like when he thinks no one's watching for anything but praise." The week crawled by, every errand and chore colored by the knowledge that Saturday would be another one of those days. Days when I would need to armor up with politeness, nod at insults, laugh at things that weren't jokes, and smile like my jaw wasn't grinding from the inside out. Saturday arrived with Boise's unpredictable spring sun, warm enough for shorts, chilly enough to regret it in the shade. Talon's house stood polished and ready, white folding chairs arranged across his perfectly mowed lawn, a tent set up near the patio for drinks and snacks. People were already gathered when we arrived, holding craft beers and cucumber water in glasses too thin to survive a real kitchen. Cassian parked 2 blocks away, as usual. Talon always forgot to leave space in the driveway. We walked through the side gate like we were sneaking in, not that anyone noticed. I scanned the crowd, faces from Talon's business circle, two couples from our old neighborhood, and of course the usual cast, Mom, Zinnia, Seraphine. Talon stood near the grill, flipping sliders with one hand and gesturing dramatically with the other. The man could sell sand to a beach. The moment he saw us, his face lit up, not with warmth, but with the grin of a man who just spotted an opportunity to perform. "Look who finally decided to rejoin the family circle," he called out, waving a spatula. "And you brought your trusty mechanic. Hope the burgers don't need an oil change, Cass." Laughter rolled through the yard like it had been waiting backstage. Cassian, bless him, just raised his drink in silent salute. I smiled too, the kind that says, "You'll choke on that someday." The afternoon dragged on with small talk, mingling, and increasingly subtle digs. Talon gave a tour of his garage like it was a museum, bragging about a vintage truck that Cassian had restored last year. And no mention of Cassian's name, of course. As the sun dipped lower, someone rang a glass to signal a toast. Talon stepped forward, holding a fresh beer. "I just want to say how good it feels to have the family together," he began, tone dripping with practiced sincerity. "We may not always see eye to eye, but at least we've all figured out our places." A few chuckles. "I mean, I may be the business brain in the family," he continued, turning slightly toward us. "But hey, at least my sister's husband keeps our cars running. And I mean that. Every family needs a reliable pit crew." The room, well, the lawn, burst into polite laughter. Someone clinked a glass near my ear. I felt Cassian's hand tighten around mine. And yet, no one said a word in our defense. Not Mom, not Zinnia, not even the friend from across the street who once borrowed Cassian's jumper cables during a snowstorm. I swallowed hard and smiled. Fake. Just like everything around me. Later, while most people hovered around the fire pit, I drifted toward the drinks table for a moment of solitude. I stared at the melting ice in the punch bowl, wondering if it would feel as numb as I did. That's when I heard her voice. "Don't let him fool you." I turned. Mom stood beside me, not looking at me, just fixing her gaze on the patio lights. "He's not as untouchable as he thinks," she added softly, "and neither are you as small as you believe." My throat tightened. I wanted to ask her why she waited so long to say it, why she never spoke up when he joked, belittled, dismissed. But instead, I nodded. That was more than she'd ever given me before. When we left, it was just after dusk. The sky was still tinged with lavender, but the air had cooled. Cassian helped me into the car, and we pulled away in silence until we turned out of Talon's subdivision. "I'm done pretending we don't notice," I said quietly, staring ahead. Cassian glanced at me, then back at the road. "Just say the word, and I'll put my name on the paperwork." "Not yet," I replied. "I want him to keep thinking I'm harmless." We drove past Talon's house one last time before turning the corner. It shrank behind us, just like the grip they'd all held on me for too long. And I knew, the next time they saw me, it wouldn't be from the bottom of their pedestal, because soon the view would be different, and so would the balance of power. We got home late that night, later than usual, the kind of late where your body's tired, but your mind refuses to wind down. Cassian went straight for the garage, said something about needing to check the compressor. I knew better. He needed space to let the tension burn off in silence. Maybe tinker with a carburetor, maybe just sit in the dark with the door halfway open, letting the cold air hit his face. I, on the other hand, went upstairs, kicked off my shoes, hung my cardigan on the hook behind our bedroom door. I washed my face, tied my hair back, and opened the spreadsheet again. This time, I didn't look at it like a wounded woman tallying up insults. I looked at it like a map. They'd drawn lines. I just hadn't realized how long ago the game started. There were entries going back over a decade. Times I was left out of group texts, investment emails, vacation invites, snide comments disguised as humor, projects Cassian had worked on that Talon took credit for. Business connections we introduced that were later claimed as Talon's own. Every entry started as a scratch of pain, but together they spelled out one message. You are not one of us. I closed the laptop and sat on the edge of the bed. Not crying, not raging, just clear. Cassian came in 20 minutes later. His shirt smelled like diesel and old pine from the cleaner he used. He dropped his keys in the dish and leaned in the doorway. "You still thinking about today?" I nodded. "I was looking at it all," I said. "Laid out." He raised an eyebrow. "Laid out how?" I tilted my chin toward the desk. Cassian walked over, glanced at the open laptop, scanned the cells. His mouth moved a little like he was counting them in his head. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he sat beside me and quietly asked, "You want to see something?" "Something what?" "Something real," he said. We went downstairs, and instead of heading for the garage, he led me to the small hallway next to the laundry room. I'd walked past that door 1,000 times, an old utility closet with boxes we hadn't unpacked since the move. Cassian reached behind a stack of paint cans and pulled a key off a hook. "You ever wonder what this is for?" he asked. I shook my head. He unlocked a narrow wooden door behind the shelf, and to my surprise, a flight of stairs descended to a space I didn't know existed. "Cass," I said, "are you secretly running a second life out of our basement?" He chuckled. "Not quite." At the bottom of the stairs was a room, no windows, but clean, lit by a single fluorescent strip overhead. On one side, filing cabinets. On the other, 2 desks, one of which had a printer, a small safe, and an old desktop computer I didn't recognize. "What is this?" Cassian pulled out a folder from one of the drawers and handed it to me. Inside were incorporation documents. A shell company registered under a different name. Purchase agreements, technical blueprints, patent confirmations. My name wasn't on any of it, but his was, and so was Talon's company. "Wait," I said, flipping through the pages. "Are you telling me you've been buying into his company?" "Not directly, but yes, through this firm. We've been slowly acquiring pieces of Raymer Dynamics, not enough to raise alarms, but enough to build a majority." I stared at him. "You're not just a mechanic." He smiled gently. "I never said I was just anything." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I needed you to see it first, see what they really think of us, what they think of you." "And now?" "Now," he said, "you see it." I nodded slowly. "You've been planning this for years?" "No, I've been preparing for years. Big difference." He turned toward the cabinet, pulled another folder. "This one," he said, "has a plan, a real one, legal steps, contact chains, paperwork ready to move. But only if you want it." My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of choice. "I want it," I said, "but I don't want to do it in secret. I want to earn it." Cassian's eyes locked on mine. "Then you help me. You become a partner, not just on paper, but in action." We spent the next 3 evenings at that basement desk, sorting documents, highlighting contracts, building a flowchart of ownership. Cassian explained everything: how corporations hide control through layered LLCs, how people like Talon get away with poor management because no one ever questions them. But I wasn't a question anymore. I was becoming an answer. We looped in Corwin Shea, Cassian's longtime attorney and the only man I'd ever met who wore cowboy boots with tailored suits. He came over on a Wednesday afternoon, and we set up shop at the kitchen table. By the time he left, I had signed my name to 4 documents that made me a legal stakeholder in 3 separate companies, each one tracing a thread toward controlling interest in Raymer Dynamics. Not directly, not obviously, but surely. That night, I sat in front of the mirror brushing my hair. I glanced at the sticky note stuck in the corner. I wrote his name, Talon, in block letters, not because I hated him, but because it was time he saw who I really was. "You will see me," I said quietly to my reflection. "On my terms." I stuck the note to the top of the mirror. Then I smiled. And soon, the boardroom wouldn't just be his domain. It'd be my battlefield. We didn't go home right after the meeting. Not right away. Cassian pulled the truck into a quiet lot off Fairview Avenue, behind a strip of closed boutiques and a shuttered barber shop. We sat there with the engine running, the radio off, the windows cracked just enough to let the Boise wind drift in. He didn't speak. Neither did I. We didn't need to. The silence wasn't heavy. It was sacred. It was the kind of silence that follows a decision so big it doesn't echo. It just settles. 3 months of planning had led to this morning. And Talon? He hadn't seen it coming. Not when Corwin Shea strolled into the Raymer Dynamics boardroom like he was delivering pizza instead of pulling the foundation out from under my brother. Not when I stepped in behind him, wearing a slate gray suit I'd borrowed from a friend who ran a boutique in Meridian. Not flashy, just clean, tailored, and unmistakably professional. Nothing about it said mechanic's wife. The receptionist had looked up from her desk and blinked twice. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said calmly. "We have a meeting with the board." She glanced at her screen, clearly not finding my name, but Corwin gave her a smooth smile and handed over a printed appointment slip with Stone Holdings printed in bold. A few minutes later, Cassian arrived in his own version of formal, black button-up, dark jeans, and polished boots that still carried the soul of the garage. We were escorted to the boardroom. I took the third chair from the end. Cassian sat beside me. Corwin stood. Talon was already there, leaning back in his leather chair like a king surveying his court. He smirked when he saw us. "What's this?" he asked. "Career day?" Corwin didn't reply. He simply began distributing folders, one to each board member, each marked confidential. Talon's smirk faltered when the room went quiet and the first board member furrowed his brow at the document. "What is this?" Talon asked again, voice firmer. Cassian answered evenly. "Ownership transition. Stone Holdings now controls 76% of Raymer Dynamics." Talon laughed. "That's not possible. I'd know." "You didn't," I said, my voice clear. "Because you never looked past your own reflection." He turned to me, blinked hard. "You?" I stood, smoothing my jacket sleeves. "Effective immediately, Talon Raymer is relieved of all duties and access, pending full transition." He slammed his palm on the table. "You can't fire me. This is my company." Cassian slid a copy of the legal filing across the table toward him. It was. Talon's face flushed red. He looked around the table, seeking backup, outrage, even disbelief, but all he got were diverted eyes and tightened jaws. No one defended him, not a single person. He looked at me again. "You planned this." I nodded. "Every word you've ever used to diminish me was another brick in the foundation I built under your feet. You handed me the blueprint. You did this for revenge," he spat. I smiled gently. "No, I did this for peace." He pushed back his chair, the legs screeching against the floor. "You're a joke." I picked up my folder. "Not anymore." He stormed out of the room without looking back. The air shifted. Cassian turned to the board, gave them a brief nod, and stood. We left without another word. Outside, a few reporters from the local business column were waiting near the curb. Somehow, word had gotten out. Cameras clicked. A mic was thrust toward me. "Is it true you just removed Talon Raymer from his own company?" I kept walking. Another voice called, "Who are you, really?" Cassian reached for my hand. I leaned toward him and whispered, "Let them wonder who I am now." He grinned. "They'll find out soon enough." We kept walking until we reached the truck. Now, parked in this quiet lot, I finally let my breath go. Cassian reached over and brushed a strand of hair from my face. You were perfect in there." I was ready. He looked at me carefully. "You sure you're still ready? Because this doesn't end here." I nodded. "I know, but I'm not hiding anymore." We drove home without speaking, but the silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything we'd dared to believe we could do. When we got home, I kicked off my heels at the door, peeled off the jacket, and sat down on the couch like I had just climbed a mountain. Cassian brought me a glass of water. "You good?" I nodded, even though I wasn't sure if good was the right word. I was changed. That was more accurate. That night, as we lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling and let the weight of the day settle into my bones. For the first time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't chasing approval or begging for space. I had made space, but Talon wasn't done. Not even close. I found out the next morning. A message popped up on my phone before sunrise, a text from an unknown number. You think this is over? You haven't seen what I'm capable of. I sat up, turned on the lamp. Cassian stirred beside me. I showed him the screen. He read it once. He's rattled. He's dangerous, I corrected. We both knew he wouldn't go quietly. We were in it now, and what came next would test everything we'd built. The text message from Talon stayed on my phone, untouched and unread again, until I finally deleted it. Not because it scared me, because I refused to let it live on my screen like it lived rent-free in his head. That was Monday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, Zinnia had gone viral. She hadn't meant to, I don't think. Her caption was vague, "You reap what you sow," but the video she posted told the whole story. Nearly 2 minutes of the boardroom exchange, clipped from the security footage Cassian had pulled with Corwin's help. My voice, measured, clear, Talon's, louder, defensive, the legal papers, the silence from the board, the line that broke the internet. You handed me the blueprint. By sunset, it had racked up 32,000 views. By midnight, over 500,000. The title someone gave it, Sister Fights Back, Mechanic's Wife Fires Her Golden Brother. I didn't share it. I didn't comment, but the comments poured in. She's my hero. I hope my daughter turns out like her. Finally, a quiet win for all the black sheep. And then, of course, came the family. It started with a call from Aunt Rochelle, who never really liked me but always hated being left out of drama. I mean, Malis, that was bold, she said. But maybe you could have handled it in private? I let her finish. Then I thanked her for her concern and hung up. After that, it was like floodgates opened. Texts from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, emails from family friends, a voicemail from Mom that started with, "I didn't know it was going to become this public," and ended with, "I hope you know what you're doing." I did, but knowing it didn't make the noise any easier to endure. Seraphine, predictably, made it worse. Her Instagram stories shifted overnight from blessed life, pool vibes, to a series of black and white selfies with dramatic captions like, "People love a takedown until it happens to their own family," and "Cancel culture doesn't build, it destroys." Cassian showed me one and asked, "Is this her attempt at mourning your brother's ego?" "More like auditioning for a Bravo spinoff," I said. We tried to keep the mood light at home, but the air carried a tension that even the silence couldn't mask. There was a cost to stepping forward, even if you were right. By Thursday, the real consequences began. Talon's company, his former company, was now facing reopened investigations. 2 former employees had submitted formal complaints to the labor board. Apparently, my little viral moment emboldened others to speak. Word was getting around that back pay issues and safety violations, once buried, had legs again. By Friday, investors were circling away. Cassian came home from a meeting with Corwin, the file folder in his hand thick with documentation. "He's going to be hit with at least 2 lawsuits before the end of the month," Cassian said, handing it over. "Labor violations, misuse of funds, possibly even fraud, depending on what else turns up." And the house? Marketed for a fast sell, below value. I took a breath, let it settle into my chest, and nodded. We didn't talk much that night, just sat on the couch, trading silence and glances. I think we were both waiting for the guilt to show up. It didn't, but something else did. That weekend, I received a private message on Facebook from someone I didn't recognize, an admin for a community page in Boise. "Would you be willing to speak at our Women in Business brunch next month? Your story has made an impact." I said I'd think about it. Monday morning, Talon called. His name flashed across the screen like a memory I hadn't asked for. I let it ring. No voicemail, just silence. That silence said more than he ever had. I didn't mention it to Cassian right away. We were both at the breakfast table, scrolling headlines while the kettle warmed. He noticed me holding my phone a little too still. "Talon?" he asked. I nodded. "He leave a message?" "No." Cassian went back to his screen, but not before saying, "That means he doesn't know what to say. That's worse than yelling." I stared out the window at the street, where 2 teenagers biked past, laughing like life was light and simple. It hadn't been simple for us in a long time. That afternoon, while Cassian was back at the garage and I was catching up on admin work for one of our smaller holdings, I opened a browser window and typed his name. There it was, plain and brutal. Former Raymer CEO faces legal and financial fallout after sudden ouster. New ownership promises safer work culture at Raymer Dynamics. Golden Boy no more. Boise's business elite watches a fall from grace. I scrolled past them all, not with joy, not with vindication, with confirmation that truth, quiet, steady, patient truth, had its own way of rising. By Tuesday evening, the rumor mill whispered divorce. Seraphine had gone quiet online, which said more than any dramatic caption could. I went out back to our garden, sat on the edge of the deck with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. Cassian joined me after an hour, sat beside me without asking what I was thinking. The stars were out, just barely. The sky was clearing itself. He's unraveling, I finally said. He's already unraveled. He's going to try something. Cassian looked at me carefully. Let him. We're not hiding anymore. And we weren't. But while the headlines were dying down, the final confrontation was still waiting to happen. The garage smelled like lemon oil and steel. Cassian had just finished wiping down the workbench, and I stood beside him, organizing sockets into their case, while the news alert buzzed again on my phone. Talon had filed for bankruptcy. Not Chapter 13, not reorganization, straight liquidation, no more shell companies, no more hidden investors. It was all public now, laid bare and picked apart by people who, 6 months ago, used to beg him for invites to fundraisers. Cassian looked over my shoulder as I lowered my phone. Want to talk about it? He asked. No. I set the phone on the shelf. But I might want to laugh later. He gave a quiet chuckle and handed me a wrench. Let me know when. Outside, the sky had gone gold, that late spring light that made even our gravel driveway look almost picturesque. I heard the gate squeak and glanced up through the window. Nancy Cooper, our next-door neighbor, came into view, carrying something wrapped in a kitchen towel. Cassian caught my glance, nodded, and wiped his hands on a rag before stepping out to meet her. She was halfway up the steps by the time I opened the door. I baked banana bread, she said, holding it out like a peace offering. You know I'm never saying no to that, I replied, taking the warm bundle. She hesitated. Her eyes drifted toward the side of the garage, then back to me. You mind if I ask something a little bold? I gave her a look that said, do I look like someone who scares easy? Nancy took that as permission. Did it feel good? What happened with Talon? I stood there for a second, the question suspended between us like it needed air to stay afloat. I didn't rush to answer. Instead, I set the bread down on the table behind me, leaned against the doorframe, and said honestly, it didn't feel good. It felt necessary. She nodded slowly, lips pressing together like she had more to say but chose not to. Instead, she said, he never liked anyone seeing past the curtain. I didn't respond. She left shortly after. And I was glad she asked, not because I needed to explain myself, but because it reminded me that people were watching and not all of them were cheering for the crash. Some were just relieved someone finally pulled the lever. That night, after dinner, after the dishes were rinsed and stacked and the kitchen light dimmed, I heard a knock at the front door. 3 slow raps, familiar but deliberate. Cassian looked up from the couch, waiting. I've got it, I said. I opened the door and found Talon standing there. No car on the street. Just him in a hoodie that didn't belong to him. It looked borrowed or forgotten in someone's closet. He looked hollow, not like a man defeated, like a man finally out of places to pretend. I stepped aside. He didn't move. You're not going to invite me in? I'm not going to slam the door, I said. That's the most you're getting. He stepped in anyway, eyes darting toward the living room, where Cassian stayed seated, unmoving, unreadable. We stood in the entry for a moment, silent. Then Talon spoke. You think I deserve this? No, I replied. I know you did. He laughed, dry and humorless. You're really proud of yourself, aren't you? I didn't blink. No, but I'm finally okay with myself. That's more important. He looked down at the floor. This family will never recover from what you did. I tilted my head. You mean the family you spent a decade building on the backs of other people's work? The one you used to climb over the rest of us? I built that company from nothing. No, I cut in. You built it from connections Mom gave you, from Cassian's designs you took credit for, from everyone else's silence. Don't confuse a borrowed ladder with a foundation. He bristled. You think you're better than me? No, I said again. But I no longer believe I'm less than you. That's what scares you. He swallowed hard, words curling behind his tongue. I didn't come here for a lecture. And I didn't come here for forgiveness, I said. So maybe we're even. He glanced toward the door. Guess that's it then. I didn't stop him, didn't offer comfort, didn't follow. He left, quietly. The door clicked behind him like a period at the end of a sentence I'd rewritten in full. Later that night, I sat on the edge of the bed, brushing my hair with slow, steady strokes. Cassian came in, pulled off his boots, and sat across from me. Did he ask for anything? He said. No. Cassian nodded. That might be the most honest thing he's done. We sat in silence for a few beats before I said, Mom used to tell me I wasn't small, just that I had to stop shrinking to fit. Cassian leaned forward. You never needed to fit into their version of success. You just needed room to build your own. I smiled, not because it was poetic, but because it was finally real. The next morning, in the garage, we were organizing tools when my phone buzzed. A news alert lit up the screen. Talon Raymer files for Chapter 7, bankruptcy. Cassian read over my shoulder. Guess that's official now, he murmured. I nodded. He tried to take down everyone else with him, and now he's watching the world move on. Cassian turned back to the tool rack, then looked at me. You regret anything? I thought about it. Then I answered, I regret letting it go on for as long as it did. We spent the next hour in companionable quiet, tightening bolts, labeling drawers, wiping down cabinets. And when I closed the door behind us, I felt lighter, not because it was over, but because I had finally stopped trying to earn respect from people who wouldn't know what to do with it if I handed it to them. Respect isn't given, it's lived. And now, I live in a world where my name, finally, means something. To me. And still, one small thread remained. A wound not yet healed. The envelope was small, cream-colored, hand-addressed in the neat cursive I hadn't seen in years. It had no return label, just my name, no title, no pretense. It arrived on a Saturday morning. Cassian and I had just finished rearranging a section of the garage, setting up shelving for the new apprentices coming in next week, when I spotted it sitting on the front porch. Someone had dropped it off by hand. No knock. No doorbell. Inside was a photo, framed in walnut wood, simple and unadorned. I recognized the image instantly. Me at 17, hair in a braid down my back, standing next to an old Ford Bronco with grease on my cheek and a socket wrench in hand. Dad stood beside me, arm draped over my shoulder. Talon was on the other side, laughing, blurry in the background. We had rebuilt that Bronco together that summer, or so I thought. On the back of the frame, taped with care, was a yellow post-it note with 6 words in black ink. You were always more than they saw. Mom. I sat on the porch step and held the frame in both hands, letting the memory settle, not as an ache, but as a truth that had been waiting too long to surface. Inside, the house was quiet. Cassian had gone to grab lunch. I could hear the ticking of the kitchen clock and the distant hum of a neighbor mowing his lawn. I stared at the picture again, this time seeing something new, not the grease or the tool or even my own youth, but the way I had been standing, squarely, confidently, like I belonged in that frame. The next day I called her. Mom answered on the second ring. I wasn't sure if you'd pick up, I said. I wasn't sure if I should, she replied, not cold, just cautious. Silence lingered between us like fog, not oppressive, just present. I got your note, I said. Another pause. I didn't know if you'd want it. I didn't think you remembered that summer. I remember more than you think, she said. I just didn't say enough of it out loud. There was a weight in those words. Not regret, not quite apology, just recognition. I'm sorry, she added. I should have said more when it mattered. I swallowed the lump in my throat and breathed slowly. You said enough. Did I? Yes. And now, I said, I get to say the rest. Not with words. With how I live. We didn't talk about Talon. We didn't have to. The silence between his name and our new sentences was enough. We hung up 15 minutes later. It was the first conversation in years that didn't end with me feeling smaller than when it started. Later that evening, after Cassian got back from a hardware run, I slipped into the garage alone. The sun was setting, throwing gold across the concrete floor, turning dust motes into something almost holy. I sat on the same bench where we'd filed our first patent papers, closed my eyes, and cried. Not because I was sad, because I was finally safe enough to cry. The kind of tears that don't come from heartbreak or rage, but from release, from realizing the thing you've been carrying no longer owns you. Cassian came in after a few minutes. He didn't ask questions, just sat beside me, wrapped his arm around my shoulders, and held on. I wasn't the favorite, I whispered. I knew it, every year, every holiday. Every whispered plan I was left out of. I knew. I know, he said. But I still needed them to see me. He nodded. And now? I don't need them to see me anymore. I need to remember that I was worth seeing all along. He didn't say a word. He just squeezed my hand. The next morning, we unlocked the back garage bay, the new one we'd renovated over the past few weeks. It looked nothing like the space we'd started in. New flooring, fresh paint, bright lights, a wall of tools that shimmered like armor. And on the far end, 5 lockers with nameplates, names of our first round of apprentices. Young men and women from the community, some straight out of high school, some retraining after layoffs, some just looking for a chance. We'd created a place for them, a place we'd never been offered. As they trickled in for orientation, I stood by the sign-in table, clipboard in hand, watching them take it all in. Cassian gave the opening talk, practical, warm, grounded, just like him. Then it was my turn. I stepped up, took a breath, and looked at the small crowd in front of me. No cameras, no boardroom, no suits, just people trying to make something of themselves. If anyone ever made you feel like you were small, I said, steady and quiet, I want you to remember this moment. I held up the framed photo Mom had given me, showed them the girl with grease on her cheek and a dream in her eyes. That was me, and this, I motioned around the garage, is what I built when no one believed I could. They watched me. I let the moment linger. Don't wait for someone to hand you permission. Start building the life that proves them wrong. Their eyes lit up, not with admiration, but with something better. Recognition, because that's what I had spent all this time searching for. Not revenge, not applause, just recognition from myself. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who spend the longest trying to convince us we're small until we prove otherwise. Malis didn't just fire her brother, she rewrote the story they wrote for her. What about you? Have you ever had to reclaim your worth in a place that refused to see it? If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. More powerful family stories like this one are coming soon.